blue and orange RC colors. It actually had the logo hand painted on it. You would sit on the door looking,
Jeff, you're gonna have
looking for RC Cola loving men and women.
What is this?
Looking for what?
RC Cola loving men and women. It was, I don't know if they were being paid by, it was in the Westchester subdivision where I grew up on the west side. And it was just there on the street, you know, I never understood it.
Is this rolling right now?
It's starting to be.
Get it rolling.
Let's start talking about the RC Cola inventory. Maybe we can. All right, so we're extrapolating from Jason's dollar store RC, and it was reminding me that as a child, there was this car on my street that was painted in the RC Cola, not those colors, but the old school dark blue and orange. And it was actually, you could tell it was hand painted. I even knew that as a kid. It was a professional job. But they replicated the RC Cola logo. And on the side was printed in orange letters, looking for RC Cola loving men and women.
This is the thing. Except for the fact that I feel like it was these colors. My brother and I, when we were little tiny kids, we had to go to Southtown.
Right.
And I feel like we were with my grandfather. And we stopped, and there was a kid standing in his yard, and he looked like he was sponsored by RC Cola. He was wearing everything he had on.
Probably BMX.
It was too early for BMX.
Yeah, this was probably the 70s, right?
This was like
74, 75.
yeah, and Bruce and I were just perplexed. He was a kid who was younger than we were. We were little. He was younger. And he was just standing in his yard, and he looked like he was sponsored by RC, but he wasn't in the colors you're talking about. He seemed to be in this, down to, it looked like he had underwear on. It was sponsored by
His
RC.
Journeys were sponsored.
I mean, I'm telling you,
I
it was
wonder
crazy.
if RC did I wonder if they just did more street stuff.
That's what I'm saying, because the fact that you're talking about
this.
this was another thing that happened around that time. Something was going on.
Yeah, something was going
RC.
on. Yeah,
Isn't
I think
it
it might have
from
been.
Illinois?
I don't think so.
I think it is.
Is it? Where is it?
Let's check the
Well, let's
Googler.
get where's RC? I always figured it was from some country that had a monarchy. The name of it. RC Cola.
If this is still, if while we're doing that, I'm just going to tell everybody right now. About a year ago, there was a punk rock flea market, and we had it at DIM, which we'll get into that, why we're not at DIM right here in a minute. But anyhow, I got these Vans gum walls that I've never seen before, like this, $6. Robert Reich, he had a booth there. But anyhow, I just thought I'd throw that in there, because I've never seen any green gum walls before, like that, 7 holes.
Okay.
Well, according to this, they're from Georgia.
Well, it's just you gotta throw stuff in sometimes as a filler, because right now I think Scott's searching, so I just.
It says it originated in Georgia.
In Georgia.
They're connected.
All right.
Well, great. Thanks a lot for coming back. We are Old School Bleep, back in your face. Got the usual crowd. We've also got some guests here to talk up the subjects at hand. Right now, of course, I'm Scott Feingold. We've got Damon Soper here, probably. There he is, off to the side, and Jeff Williams.
Hello.
There, who we're the usual core, but right now we have guests with us. You can introduce yourself, so I don't seem like I'm the only one who talks.
My name's Amanda.
And I'm going to say this about Amanda right now. Go ahead, Amanda.
Well, that's my name. It's Amanda.
Amanda, this is what happened. This is how the whole thing started to come together. DIM Art House, which we recorded all the other episodes at, it still is a functioning thing, but we don't have a building anymore, right? The owner sold the building. So then we needed a new place to do these. And it just so happened to be that somehow Amanda and I were talking and started thinking about the backdrop wall. So hopefully there's shots of this, of the backdrop wall, which we can talk about here. And I thought since we needed a new location, this would be a good.
Yeah, and we'll be probably kind of nomadic for a little while here, moving from place to place.
So that's a portion of why.
Right.
Of why we're doing it.
Right, so we've got Amanda, and we're in Amanda's space, and thank you very much, Amanda, for
Welcome.
allowing us into your home. And
And I'm Jason, and I'm a guest in Amanda's house.
And we
So,
see
yeah.
it works out.
on
There
Old
we
School
go.
Bleep as well. So here we are, and it's been a little while. We take our time between episodes, and we make no apologies for that because quality is more important than speed.
Mm-hmm.
And today we've decided to kind of call this to order because of the groundbreaking or earth-shaking, perhaps be more accurate, recent passing away of Steve Albini, the engineer and musician who is such a big part of the music scene that we've all grown up with. That for our segment of the demographic, it's a gigantic, occurrence, a major shift and a big tragedy. Whereas even though he was well known for having, recorded bands like Nirvana and Pixies, it's still barely a kind of a blip in most people's radar. But for, I think, people like us, this is a major thing. And something that is also important, I think, is the fact that Jason and I both, and Damon, all recorded with Steve Albini at Electrical Audio. So we had personal experiences with him in that process. And Amanda also has had dealings with him as well. Right?
I know I never had dealings with him. I was introduced to his work in the 90s.
Which a lot
Probably.
you'll see on this
Yeah.
wall behind
Yeah.
us.
Okay. Well, go ahead, if you want, Amanda, just to kind of ease us into it, talk to us about your experiences.
So I'm simply a fan. I know nothing about
She used to
writing
book-
music.
She booked shows too.
That may have happened in a former life. But I don't know anything about writing music. I don't play an instrument. But I'm a fan and of lots of different kinds of music. But Steve Albini's certainly a huge presence in my record collection. And when he died, I gasped and started getting all these texts from friends with memories and stuff. And I wrote Jeff, I can't believe this. And I was like teary over it for 2 days. And I don't typically get that way over people I don't know. But it was moving, and we were texting, and then Jeff asked if Old School Bleep could record here.
It just sort of came together
And
like that.
he knew about my poster collection, and a lot of these bands were somehow connected to.
Will, and I think that was part of it when we were kind of texting back and forth after, we kind of both had heard the news. You sent me a picture, and that's what made it all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, there's a lot of those bands. And I thought it would be a cool tie-in since we didn't have the space like I'd mentioned earlier. So, okay, now I'm going to just jump in here quickly because out of everybody here, I kind of probably the least familiar, right? But I wanted, before my phone dies, I kind of just compiled a list of bands that we played with that he had recorded. Which might not be really significant to some, but there's a lot of this which will tie in later as you get into your personal stories here. But I'll save my list here. Leftover Crack, we played with here in Springfield. The Digits, which was from the Charleston, Champaign sort of area. Lead singer Rick Sims was also in the Gaza Strippers and also in Super Suckers for a while.
Yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald band, never forget.
Oh yeah. But way back, the Digits had played in Springfield, Killdozer, which was like one of my all-time favorite bands from Madison, Wisconsin. He had recorded them. Pansy Division, which we played with in Iowa.
Well, I guess it's kind of late now to say what you already knew. I really wanted you.
They were from Champaign, or at least John Ginoli was, because he used to be in the band The Undecided.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Wasn't he? No, The Outnumbered. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Outnumbered.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
there was a
we saw them.
Champaign
I saw
connection.
them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, they were. Yeah, John Ginoli was from Champaign. I knew people who went to school with him. And he was in a band. The Undecided. But The Outnumbered was his earlier.
I
Not so specific. I saw them open for the replacements on the Let It Be tour when they played at Tritos. This is what I'm good for. It's just like hanging out with me, is I will drop something like that on you. And sit back.
No, I didn't know that. That's great.
There's a Tritos Uptown
Oh wow.
handbill from like everything that happened in May, and like I put the date on it in '89.
89.
Well,
This
So
would have
you
been.
would see
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah,
all of
very cool.
all of
Well,
the-
Yeah, that was like
Smashed.
85. It was like 84. It was like it was right when Let It Be came out.
Right.
I got a girl, never gets old. I got a girl, wrinkles and folds. I got a girl, show sharp and fat. Got a girl, give me a heart attack. Staples,
Veruca Salt in Carbondale, Illinois, which I think a lot of people would be familiar with. A band called the Volcano Suns, which actually played here in Springfield.
Wasn't the one of Shellac was in
Bob Weston.
Bob Weston.
The previous band.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they played back at, Amanda, you might remember, it was either at the across from Skank Skates, what is either Bruce's or the Underground, back when, one of those, the names, but I remember
I think
Mount
it was
Shasta came and
Bruce's.
played. Was it
I
Bruce's?
think
You think
it was, yeah.
Peg Boy, which is Chicago, kind of, yes.
Yeah.
I thought they, and of course the Poster Children.
Yeah, and we played backwards. They did a show with Poster Children at Fifth and Monroe.
That's right.
That's
That's
right.
right. Yeah.
We covered that in a previous
Yeah,
episode.
exactly.
Talked about
I
that a
know,
little
but
bit
it's like it's
on
important to
that,
have
so.
it's important to have callbacks and context.
But that's why I just figured some of these,
Intertextuality.
Episode 7.
which I know a lot. You'll talk about this, and there's bands that like Slint and Big Black and Ty Segall.
Yeah,
Guided by Voices, obviously Nirvana, Urge, Overkill, even Cheap Trick, even
Yeah, when
which
they
is kinda crazy. So
re-recorded in color.
anyway, that's all. I just wanted to get that, and then of course, when we had the CD dug, which actually Lance and Eric, our other guitar player and drummer at the time, they were trying to get us to record with Steve Albini, but it just wasn't. He was busy as hell at that point, and we were like touring a lot at that point too. So we tried to either him or Butch Vig. We were going to try to record with, but it just never really connected. But around the same time, also. Before Doug came out, we were trying to think of a name for Doug, for the release, and we kind of narrowed it down some, but it almost all changed when in Champaign we opened for the Jesus Lizard, which was another band that he had recorded a lot of things with, and when we were playing, Dave Yao, pretty drunk, up on top of the place was packed. He's up on top of a bar, and it's like all of a sudden he thought it was time to thank the opening bands, and so, and we played Champagne quite a bit at that time. So even though there was also a whole other crowd there to see the Jesus Lizard,
So Annihilate following.
There was Annihilate followers for sure, and other people who knew about or would tolerate us too, who were in Champagne, who were at the show. But anyhow, so Dave, I was like, oh, I'd like to. Oh fuck! I'm gonna thank the opening band right now, and they were. Then you could tell he just blanked. He goes, "Oh, R2D2, whatever the fuck they call it." And so
Close.
the whole crowd, you could hear this like, whoa, this funny thing where it was like, oh god, they just put that stupid name of that band from Springfield on blast. It's awesome, it was that sort of a thing. But we all came like converging from different parts of the bar to find each other like,
we should call it R2D2. You know, so it almost was until some of Doug's shenanigans. Then we ended up calling it something different. But
And that was the thing about recording with him, was that if you had the time and the money and he had the space, you could always record with him because of his just his work ethic and his overall ethic, that nobody was really better than anybody else. And
we had gone up there. Damon and I had gone up there with Jay Vanslow and Sam West in 2013, I think. And so we're trying to remember walking. I'm trying to recall back the time. I don't know how these guys felt, but I was kind of nervous just because of who he was, and he has this kind of cantankerous reputation that preceded him, and he was he's caustic, acid tongue, at times, and we didn't know what we were getting into, but I knew we wanted to record with him, and we go in and get our equipment down or whatever. We're in the control room, and he comes in and he has like this little sit-down talk with us. Like, I don't even know if you remember this, Damon. Yeah. It was almost like a little 30 minutes therapy session. He's got his yellow legal pad there, okay? And he's doing the right thing. He's getting to know the band. He's, what kind of record do you want to make? And I remember we had said we want to try to record 6 songs. He did not look amused. He kind of looked up, over his glasses. He's like, "That's a tall order." And
This is the
Right.
he said. That's very ambitious
yeah.
of you. He goes, "We'll see how it goes."
Right.
Yeah, and so he was writing down, told me a little bit about the songs, and he had these notes for each song, what kind of instrumentation and all that. And here's the thing about Steve: he's got all these guitars, all these amplifiers, all these Hammond B3 organs, you name it, he's got it. And none of it was sacred. It didn't matter if it was a Travis Bean guitar that he uses in shellac. He's got a couple of those on the wall. He didn't care if Kurt Cobain played it or Jimmy Page played it. If it's there, you want to use it, you can.
Wow.
And so I took advantage of, he's got these old orange amps with like the big knobs on them. Remember this? And,
I remember those old
I couldn't
ones,
figure out how to turn the damn thing on. So I think I had to call over Damon because I couldn't figure it out. But and then you tell him, it's like, what kind of guitar tone do you want? And I felt weird asking him, but Shellac has the song called My Black Ass, and the opening chords sound very Malcolm Young for me, the rhythm guitar player from AC/DC. Very clean, but still kind of got some crunch to it. I said, I really like that sound, and I felt weird asking him that, like, I want your guitar sound, even though our music sounds nothing like Shellac or anything. And I said, did you get that tone? Was that inspired by Malcolm Young? And he's like, we're gonna get along fine. And then I felt very relieved,
So he just kind of needed to lay down some like basic groundwork almost, probably, because he had so much stuff going on that he, you know what I mean, in ways like, we got to get to the point. We can't start BSing around, so let's do these things.
So
And-
at the end of the night, we recorded 7 songs,
Yeah.
and it's late, and he stood there. I mean, he was there the whole time. He didn't leave, and he's mixing it down. You remember him getting a new reel and whipping the tape off and spinning it around and putting it on. And we get done, and he said, "Good job, guys. Getting you were very efficient."
It was after midnight when we got there, wasn't it?
He said, way to be efficient, or something like that. He goes, "I didn't think you guys would get all your tracks done, but when we got to that 7th song, I think it might have been My Tune or whatever. He was like, let's do it." So it was a pleasure working with him.
I remember, I think it was Vanslow had a guitar solo on one of the songs, or a little bit of a guitar line or something. And I think Jay maybe had flubbed a couple notes or something. And that's when we got to watch him take the tape with
This is analog. This is all analog.
It's all
right?
analog.
It's all
So
analog.
it's all
That's
tape.
another thing people have to understand.
this is not digital.
It's not digital.
Right,
This
right.
isn't Pro Tools. This is analog.
That's what I meant by
Magic tricks. Okay, go
the
ahead.
reel-to-reel tapes.
Right.
And he's getting a new reel of new tape that we had to pay for, but
Maybe scooch up on that microphone a little.
his machine is vintage, analog equipment.
Yeah.
It's really cool to watch.
But to watch him splice he literally did it old school, took a razor blade, and he's doing this like he's talking while he's doing this. So he was not in some kind of leave me alone. I've got to get this cut right. He's sitting there talking.
Where are these made, Steve? The Studer? Switzerland.
Oh, really?
Well, the company still exists and they still sell those, but there haven't been any of that particular model made for a long time, since the 90s.
We were just kind of chit-chatting back and forth. I remember asking him, like, hey, who would you clear your schedule for? And he's like, oh, that's easy. AC/DC, Willie Nelson, and Neil Young. I'm like, oh, okay, makes perfect sense. But
Saying that
watching
voice.
him do that.
Yeah, oh, it's easy. I'll
Well,
tell
speaking
you.
of that,
You
that
know.
analog thing, when my band Up 1280 recorded with Albini at Electrical Audio in 2008, we were pretty efficient. I think we were only trying to do 5 songs, but at one point we had recorded this on cloud cover, and we were really happy with the way that it came out. And the scratch vocal seemed like it was going to be the lead vocal, and everything was good. And we were all sitting there kind of patting each other on the back. We'd gotten this sort of difficult song down, and Steve walked into the room, and he had this kind of dejected look. And he went over to our drummer, Matt Scroggins, and he said, dude, it's like, I got to tell you, I know that if we leave this on here, I know the other drummers that I know would just make them cringe every time they listen to their own record. So you blew part of the fill right before the third verse, and he played it back, and Matt listened, and he was like, oh, we could tell he just like didn't quite do it. And so he was like, don't despair. And he said, if you want to redo it, we can just do that drum part. Just do the fill. and he pulled the reel off, and he pulled the tape out. And I don't know if you saw the big plastic wands with the eraser on them that he had in his studio.
Yeah, I think
well, he
so.
pulled that out, and he looked like he was reading tea leaves at the tape. He made a little erasure on the front tape.
I remember him doing that.
And then he put it back on, and he queued it up exactly. Matt did the drum part.
He did the same thing with me. He said, you hit the snare drum mic. He goes, but don't despair.
Right.
I can do this is what he called it, a spot edit.
Right.
Hit the snare drum mic.
No,
He's
it
fixing it.
there's a clack sound. It sounds like you hit either a rim or the snare drum mic or something. But you can hear it on the snare drum mic. You can just barely hear it on the other mics. So I spot erased it off the snare drum mic.
Nice job, David.
I think it's fine.
You can't.
Insane. I mean, that's insane to think about because this is physically
It's
taking. You know what I mean?
Right.
How
Taking-
well do
but I
you
don't even
know that?
right.
Where you can just
it
take
almost
this.
felt like a parlor trick, except
Oh,
that
definitely.
he physically did, and he was doing
Right.
it theatrically. He was doing it knowing we were going to be like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
but it was still he did it. It wasn't a phony thing. He cut that 3 seconds or 2.5 seconds out precisely. And then we did the drum, and just did the drum part, and it was fine. But he was like, we might have to do the vocal again because of the fill was the cue for my vocal to come back in.
Right.
And just to do my little bragging part, apparently my timing was so exact that it worked with the
Oh, really?
fill, that
But-
there was no break.
To your point on the
Yeah.
drums, that's one of the reasons why I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, that's why I wanted to record there mainly, because these were new songs that we were doing with Damon on drums, and everyone knows Damon's an amazing drummer, and I'm like, we need something to do these justice. And when you listen to like Todd Trainer from Shellac or something, those drums are like live. Like they are so full of sound.
I mean, I was listening to like it was like a random mix of a bunch of Nirvana songs. It was a bunch of Bleach stuff and a bunch of Nevermind stuff, some B-sides, and then Penny Royalty came on, and the drums were the star. Suddenly, it stuck out like a sore thumb from all those other recordings. There was like a point where Grohl's drums are like at the front between like before the bridge or whatever, and it was just like there was more like quality music, like entertainment value in that drum fill than there had been in almost
And I go there with the only drum set that I had, and it's not a pretty drum set. It's a beat up Blue Sparkle Del Rey made in Japan drum set, and there's no floor tom. I have no hi-hat, and I have two basically crash ride cymbals. And Albini had that whole thing. He had the tom mic from the bottom. He had a mic from the top. He had the snare drum mic from the bottom, mic from the top. He had that whole kit. Just so many microphones on it, and he said, we'll get this thing sounding good.
And it does. Songs that we recorded, like there's a couple of them, like En Route to Houston, Tinker's Blues, where the drums really shine on the song. That's an integral part of those songs, and so to have that sound of that, that big Studio A electrical audio, that really helped, and it just helped bring everything so alive, and I love it. I love listening to stuff recorded there.
Well, that's the thing, was like where, and like I said, I don't really know as much as any of you do about his stuff, but like with like, there was a band, the Dazzling Tillman, let's say. Is your Dazzling Tillman up there?
You got everything up there, don't you?
Yeah.
I
dated the drummer for a little bit right after they recorded with Steve Albini.
And they were from from like the Alton area.
St.
Yeah,
Louis.
that's what I thought. Alton. I thought that they were from there. I remember the first time we met them in Charleston, Illinois. But they were three-piece, right? Were they three-piece? Yeah, and the bass player...
Acid jazz.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I'm on those skeleton wheels. I'm only
but or Killdozer, Slint. It's like he wasn't. There was like the ones that stuck out to me. It wasn't like tons of effects to make this. It's like this stripped down sound, but also is big. It's very full, but it's very. You can hear everything that you're supposed to hear. You know what I mean? It's not like let's get some effect. Put a lot of chorus on or a vocal or echo or something.
It's none of that.
It's none of that. But it's still. It's like it gets what. It's like dry, but not dry. It's a straight. I don't know how exactly you'd call it, but it's just crisp. In voluminous though.
Right. It sounds live, but better than
yeah,
live.
and that's what I've always appreciated. I mean, I love a live show. I love the nervous energy, the oftentimes faster tempo because of that nervous energy, the background noise of the crowd, the glasses clinking in the background, and all of that. But a Steve Albini engineered record is the band playing the way they want to sound in a pure space.
Yes.
And everything is captured the way the band wrote it down on the yellow legal pad.
Yeah, with the scratch vocal thing is like for those who haven't been in the studio, scratch vocal is just kind of a guide vocal. It's what you do so that the band, when they're maybe recording,
knows where they're at.
version where
Right.
the cues are, and then the usual practice in the studio would be to go in and get a more nuanced take, maybe try different lines different ways, and cut it all together. And his aesthetic was to try to get it just on the most spontaneous. Unless you blew a lyric or
Right.
something like that, then you didn't have a problem with going back and letting you fix it, but it was better to be in that moment.
Yeah, and I think a good example of that is the first song on Slint's Tweez.
Oh yeah.
When
yeah.
What the singer is it Mike McMahon? He's can't hear out of the headphones, and he's like, Steve, these headphones are fucked up. I'm gonna get another one. I'm gonna need another. And it's recorded, and it's him speaking to, and it's the first thing you hear on that.
Oh.
Steve, these headphones are fucked up. They're only coming out at one side. Should I have a spare with it or what?
I mean, he never left a fingerprint on anything he engineered, but that. That's where he's mentioned, and that's like a fingerprint, but not his.
But it's just capturing this thing.
It's that moment. Yeah.
It's the moment, It's yeah.
Well, that was so interesting because his reputation, and Damon and Jason would be interested to hear your take on this, was always to be his stated ethos was, I'm just here to serve the band. I'm not a producer. I'm a recording engineer, and that's it. Did he offer any creative ideas for you to take or leave, or did he try to say, is there a way, does this work for you? Or did he just follow your directive?
He did ask, so what do you think? I thought, maybe we could do this. What do you guys think? And he would kind of say that. What do you guys think? Our answer was always just kind of like, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
How's this balance sound to y'all with the
Sounds nice.
the vocal to music balance and I'm bringing the guitar up for the two instrumental sections. I mean, after there's the beginning section where it's by itself, where the two guitars are by themselves, and then there's the rocking section and then the singing. There's another instrumental section right after the backing vocal section.
Yeah.
So I'm bringing the guitar up for that little lead section, and then again for the instrumental bit at the end. So if that all sounds reasonable, then I can go ahead and put that.
That sounds perfect.
Plus, what he was suggesting was always seemed like the right thing to do.
So we had this song called Shamed that was kind of almost a mid-tempo song, and he heard us run through it, and he said, all right, I'm kind of hearing this as like kind of a big last dance at the prom kind of thing. And he went and he mixed it up and he made it exactly his vision of it. And then he was like, I'm not going to force this on you, but do you like that? But it was like, yeah, it sounded way better than anything we would have thought of. So it was almost like there was a stealth production going on. You know, he had a vision that he didn't force on you, but he had ideas. And I will say, I don't think Jim Schneep heard this happen, and I don't think I ever told him about it because he's not very good at taking a compliment. But
He about to.
But if he watches this, he'll hear it. But one day he was going back and mixing a recording of this song, and we had called Because I Did, and Jim did this very Andy Gill Gang of Four high intensity, choppy, crazy guitars.
The Gang of Four.
The Gang of Four style. I think
the
whole song was
Flicky.
very Gang of Four-ish with a lot of with a certain overdriven, natural overdrive. And Albini had the cans on, he had the headphones on, and he was muttering to himself, "Oh, I love this guitar. I love this guitar part." And I remember just being like, Jim would just go out on the street and vomit if he heard him say that, just out of,
Steve, tell me if I'm misremembering. Did he attend your wife's cooking class?
No, so my wife Denise is a professional chef, and she owns Copperpot Cooking Studio, and she was going to have some guest chefs come in because Steve, for those of you who don't know, Steve cooks for his wife. His wife Heather Winna, I think at the time she was maybe the manager or something at Second City in Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. And so he would cook late night meals for her, and somewhere on the internet he's got a blog that photos and stuff of dinners, but he, so he's making dinner for his wife at 1 a.m. And I had brought, Denise had foraged for some ramps, the wild onions, and I took those up there as kind of like a peace offering to Steve. And he's like, "Oh, this is awesome." And I remember he sent me an email a few days later after we recorded. He said, "Hey, those ramps are getting eaten tonight," and passed it on to Denise. But he was going to come down, said, "Hey, you want to come down, cook with some kids?" If I remember, he was going to cook with some kids. And I think it was just a scheduling thing. He wanted to do it. He was all set to do it, and it just never worked out.
Some of the old school Bleep viewers and listeners who are familiar with Steve Albini as a musician behind Shellac and Big Black, and also an amazing recording engineer, may not know that he was also a very good poker player. Steve won 2 World Series of Poker gold bracelets.
He seemed very professional, very affable, very encouraging. Exact opposite of what his press image was. Yeah. And a lot of that stuff that he said was back in the 80s, really. It was so, through, he would say stuff later on, but back in the Big Black era, the first time I heard of Albini was when I picked up, I had family lived in Chicago, and I picked up this magazine called Matter magazine that was the first issue that I picked up was in 1984. It had Fusker 2 on the cover, and he wrote a bunch of really acerbic, obscene, nasty blow-off reviews of records that he clearly listened to half of the time, and it just said the whole, and he wasn't, it was just my opinion, but it was really, he came across very entertaining, extremely abrasive and dismissive, and then, back in the Big Black era, right up through, before In Utero, or even a little bit past, we would make comments about Pixies or about Courtney Love or whatever. It just seemed like, just awful things to say.
Yeah, I don't know if the Pixies deserved the verbal beating he gave them repeatedly. I mean, I think he walked back the comments
he did
later in life, but some of those bands, he was brutal. And these are bands he recorded.
I know, exactly.
And he made no excuses for it. Publicly, he even stated, "Hey, I don't expect any grace from anybody."
Right.
I was wrong. And I have no excuse.
I wouldn't do it now, but I did it.
I wouldn't do it now. And
and that's, you acknowledge it, and you make your amends and your repairs as best you can, and that's all we can ever hope for all the things that we've done that we don't.
Speaking of something like that, I remember this was way, way back, Amanda, and your sister, Emily, So I remember
Can't even imagine.
we
Can't even
like
imagine what this is.
like a band came to Springfield that played. They're actually up on the wall over there, and we weren't playing this show, but everybody was there at this show. It was really cool. So anyhow, though, afterwards we had a party at the what people back then called kind of the Annihilate House or wherever that we lived at, right? And this was it. The show was either Bruce's Tavern or the Underground was right over there, but we're like 2.5, 3 blocks away. So all these people come over there, and we were kind of nerds. So I mean, people were kind of drinking some, but I was like, man, let's get out we got out like Twister, the game Twister, and I had a bunch of like ice cream and stuff. So I'm making that for the people who were there. I mean, they're drinking too, but so this band, they came over too, and they're like, this is the best party we've been at on this tour. This is hilarious. You know, we're playing Twister, and you know what I mean? Like everybody's having this nerdy sort of a time. And the place there was a ton of people there. But anyhow, so this other friend and this band, they kind of, some stuff sort of happened. Well, anyhow, next time we play, I start blathering about this on stage. And I remember Amanda and Emily were just like, dude, you can't put people's personal stuff on there when you're playing the show just trying to be funny. You know what I mean?
I don't remember that, but
but anyhow, and the thing was, it was like, but that was like a huge growing thing for me. You know what I mean? Because I was like, yeah, I can't think. I need to think about, even though I can think everything's funny and ha ha at the time. You know, when you're up there and everybody's going along with it, because it was to the point where we, had a big, a big following when we were out like touring a lot and stuff. So we come back to Springfield but that always stuck with me. That you came up to me after I did this. We played a show at Davy Burns when Davy Burns was still. I think we played with
Fair Hills.
In Fair Hills Mall. There's a club there. I think we either played that show with either Menthol or Mother from. They were the same band, different name, from Champaign, and they were they were going to be one of these bands, kind of like the Long Hum sort of era, But anyhow, it was with them, and it might have even been Fritz. What's his name? Franz Fleischli, one of his bands. He was back in town for it too.
Who was the band?
Well, it was the 7-Year Bitch,
okay.
And so they came to the house, and then some stuff happened. I was just saying it because I was like, I thought it was funny, and you were like, no, you can't be.
And I was kind of friendly with those ladies.
You were. No, you were. Oh, absolutely. It wasn't like, I didn't take it as but it was like a growing thing for me. You know what I mean? I was like, I have to have some responsibility, kind of more than just get up here and just say whatever I want at any given time, even if everybody's cracking up laughing and thinks it's funny, or the other person's, you know what I mean? It's just like you kind of, so just tying in with what we were talking about, how people, we all grow, we all grow over time with experiences that we have and stuff.
I think a lot of times if you say something at Fair Hills Mall, it's not going to travel that far.
Right.
But a lot of, we can all quote the terrible things he said about the Pixies or about Courtney Love or whatever, because it was all, it was public speech as opposed to just kind of.
Yeah. And that's before the internet.
Right, exactly.
Right. All of this is before the internet.
Right, every single thing. Even now, we actually traveled in time before the internet to record this.
It's true the way it's getting recorded.
But
that speaks to his integrity, though.
Right.
To be able to own.
Oh yeah.
Own that shit.
Right.
Yeah.
I think Steve Albini would really appreciate the podcast.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's true. So when Seething Coast played, did you avail yourself of his equipment? Or did you mainly use your own stuff?
I used his guitar amp.
We used the organ, the Hammond B3.
Yeah,
I think he even played it through a Leslie speaker. If I'm not, we did use some of the, but he didn't try to force a drum set on me. I was like, this is the drum set I got to play, because I've been practicing on it. So I can't. If you start throwing me extra stuff, I'm gonna not be able to play it. Yeah. And that reminds me when we played with the Queers.
I drop trucks and bubble gum and oh my gosh, I'd love to love them all. Listen to the styles that were cramped. much of everything and everyone is in. Well, don't get hot and bothered, listen, I know I've got problems, I also know just what this goofy world is. Yummy, yummy punk rock.
In Chicago, that drummer was like, use my drum set, you know, it's set up, why set up in front of my, and I'm like, I have to use this drum set.
I forgot about that, yeah.
And he had, it had the bird's eye view, the band would sit up above the stage and look down, and he watched us play, and he stopped me as, we're passing and I'm tearing my stuff down, he stopped me, he goes, you're right. You couldn't have used my set. You play that perfectly. He's like, you would have been lost on my kit. And I'm like, yeah.
Like Randy, I remember actually was like, I feel awkward asking you about this. I'm kind of just freaked out to be in the room with somebody who recorded with Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. Do you have any stories about that? And he was totally there with it. He would talk about that stuff, no problem. And had kind of a weird anecdotal moment with him. I don't remember how it came up, but in 1982, when I was 15, and I guess he would have been 15, 16, he would have been 19, 20. We're both at this concert in Chicago of Public Image Limited, back when they still had Keith Levine and Martin Atkins. John Wobble had left. So it was a show at the Granada Theater.
And Atkins now lives in Decatur.
Yeah, Atkins is part of this.
Part of the Milliken.
Yeah, he
staff,
was.
right?
Yeah, he's doing this whole music thing. He
He
did for a while anyway. Yeah, he was running a music program out of Milliken.
The Milliken.
Okay,
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, pretty crazy. But so it was kind of an old school PIL before it became kind of John Wagner and the Hired Guns. And but I was 15. He was just about starting Big Black at that point. And I mentioned somehow that we were at that show, and he was like, "Oh, you were at that show," and he started going on about it. And he said that guitar that Keith Levine was playing, the Volano guitar, VIII, he was like, that I just wanted that guitar more than anything. And I was just lusting after it. And he told this story that he now owned that guitar. And the way that he got it was that it was kind of sort of a distasteful story in a way, that he had heard through the musical grapevine that Keith Levine had his heroin addiction had gotten really bad. He moved to New York City and was kind of living in a squatting type situation, and he figured that most likely that guitar would be in a pawn shop somewhere in the neighborhood where Keith Levine lived. So he went to New York specifically to go around to the pawn shops to find where Keith Levine would have got rid of the Volano guitar, and he got it.
Wow.
And he had it. He sort of bragged to me about that. Not really bragged, but he was just kind of like, "Hey, I got that Keith Levine Volano guitar." And then it's kind of funny because Kurt Cobain is known to have played Steve's Volano guitar on the song "VIII" in Utero. So I'm assuming that's the same guitar that was Steve Levine's guitar from that show that we own. So there's a real music nerd to music nerd story. Only people who know those proper names of equipment and musicians will even be able to appreciate that. The things that you care about that we're talking about, like that drum sound, that live feel, the difference between recording analog drum because of the fatter signal that you get from those microphones as opposed to what you would get through a digital. I think that those things, and this unfortunately I think goes for a lot of non-musical things as well, that we appreciate those sort of nuances and things that we recognize the quality of, that because we grew up with it, because we value it. I think if you played like that drum part that I was talking about from Penny Royalty to somebody who was just listening casually to something through Spotify, they might be like, oh, if you put their attention to it, they might be like, oh yeah, that does sound pretty cool, but I don't think it matters that much to them. That quality, it's just like, oh, that's a cool drum part. maybe I could sample that, you know, or
Well,
you
just
know.
the fact that talking about Steve Albini recording, you know, the way he did, just all the time you put into that. But then people nowadays, what's important to them is convenience,
Right.
and so an MP3 file, which is just a compressed, terrible version of all the work that, you know, a good producer has put in. There's Led Zeppelin albums that are, you know, spent so much time and effort to get this panning and all this big sound, but then it just gets compressed into this little digital format for convenience, so they can listen to it on their phone, and that's it. And all that's doesn't matter because it's that
And
all
even
the
if
work
they-
is gone.
But even if they can, it's sort of like when they talk about like, AI, write a song in the style of Leonard Cohen or something like that. You know, Leonard Cohen might have spent 3 years, you know, writing 2,500 verses that he crossed out until he got the perfect one. AI spits out something that, for most people's purposes, does the same thing.
Yeah.
That thing that he, you know, or what they're talking about with Francis Ford Coppola with his new movie that he made, where the people the young techs,
Babylon,
with Megalopolis, something like
that's
that you know, he was directing the same way that he directed Apocalypse Now or The Godfather, where he would show up on set and maybe rethink something and go in the other room and rewrite it and come back out. And there was some makeup thing he was doing with Adam Driver where he physically had it done instead of doing it digitally. And the guys who were working for him were like, has this guy ever made a movie before? You know, like somehow that stuff isn't going to, I mean, what does show up, and it is there, it just doesn't seem like it maybe is as valued or recognized by the audiences. So a lot of that care might go out the window.
I mean,
there's also, to me, I mean, there's also, you know, there's a lot of people who now want to have, that's why they like vinyl and stuff like that again. You know what I mean? Because they want to hear that experience.
Cassettes
of what
are
it's
back.
like. Right. And,
Taylor
you know, a lot of
Swift
that
last album came out on cassette.
You know, it just seems like, yeah, I think that as things go further in that kind of like convenience pack kind of way, you know, where everything's getting compressed and the equivalent of something is somehow accepted as the actual thing more and more. I think there's a backlash.
There'll be a
to that.
backlash, right? There's absolutely going to be where there's other people who just they aren't going to be into that. It might be a niche, but it still will be. There will be people
It'll still
who
exist.
absolutely
And
exist.
and honestly, as I was sort of saying at the beginning, what Albini was doing that we all valued was always going to be a blip on most people's radar. It's really just the people who care. You
but
know,
I think it's a blip on most people's radar, but he's on their radar,
Whether
and
they
they
know it or
don't
not.
even know it.
That's right,
I think that he wanted to give back in as many ways as he could to the scene that he loved, and as a musician and as an engineer, and so
absolutely.
he didn't want to take the royalties because he was doing his part by contributing, and it wasn't about him, it was about everybody else that he was facilitating.
Right. And the thing is, it is, you know, what, like we're talking about, kind of in calling it a blip, but it's a very important blip. You know what I mean?
But also there's ripples from it.
Going out. And that's
Yeah.
exactly
People
why,
don't
because
know.
that blip has these ripples that
Right.
some people might not
They
understand.
might not they'd say, you know, Steve Albini. You say the name, maybe it doesn't make any difference, but he's still impacted their lives.
And then
in
you
ways they
say
aren't aware
like
of.
artists or records that they've heard, and they're like, oh.
Well,
So-
to your point about him kind of giving back to the scene, like that's how we were able to record.
Right.
Who would have
Right.
thought?
Right.
I would have
Yeah,
never
I mean,
dreamed
that's
in a
the
million
thing.
years I'd be able to record an album
Right.
Right.
with the guy who recorded Jimmy Page.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I mean, I knew you booked time at the studio, but I thought he'd have somebody else recording. Like, I didn't think he would be
Well, you
there
can
to actually
record.
work
You could.
it.
You still can. and you
Like the
could.
whole day, I really didn't think he would be there
Yeah.
and doing
Yeah.
hands-on with us until
He actually showed up.
1 a.m.
Right.
And there he was, and he was almost like happy to be there with us. You know, it was amazing.
Well, I mean, he described himself as like being the plumber. You know, like he went to work, he tightened the thing.
And he wore the cover.
He wore the cover. He had a trivia question, I guess. Anybody know what I think the only album that he actually took the producer credit for was there's one album in his career that was like, there was some stuff, I think the Peter Soto's record was technically produced by him because it was just tapes put together, but a band, like a recording of music that actually says produced by Steve Albini. Anyone know?
Is it something that's going to throw us off, or it's going to be something that's
It's not something, no, it's, I mean, I just happen to remember that this is a fact and I looked it up, but it was actually Fred Schneider's solo album, Just Fred.
Oh!
Because
I wouldn't have even,
because Fred Schneider came to him and said he wanted to record. He's like, I want you to produce my album. He was like, well, I don't do that. He's like, no, I want you to produce my album. I want you to pick the musicians. I want you to help me figure this out. And that's why he has, like, he put together a band with like members of Six Finger Sadley and John Spencer Blues Explosion.
No, John Spencer, that's right.
All those up there, and people that he knew, and created a couple different lineups, and he just took control of it, and Fred just did the vocals and the lyrics.
And Fred was in B-52.
Fred Schneider on
B-52.
But I was a fan of the Poster Children, and after I heard about Steve Albini from, Slint and all these other bands, I remember like looking at the liner notes of Flower Plower and like, oh,
that name keeps on popping up everywhere.
Right, and then I, of course, would see it more and more. But
we do one of the internet most popular things on the internet is the unboxing of product. So what we have here is Jason brought this package that came in the mail to him, and we're going to unbox it. That people like to do on the internet. He's gonna, so let's see. Do you do the honors, and we will see what's in this box.
Living dangerously, pulling the scissors towards myself.
I'm not tasked with that.
I think we'll.
Here we go. Unboxing happening.
Yeah, this is cool. Oh my goodness.
The moment is here.
Their album's always so cool.
So this is, Jason, what is this again?
So this is the new Shellac album that was released 10 days after Albini died.
Look at that.
It's called
Hold it up to the camera.
This is an incredible photograph. And I like how it's like mono, like which is a lot like which is a lot like other Shellac albums.
It's a unified aesthetic.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. So the unboxing has happened.
It has happened and it's yours. Congratulations. I have one thing. If you haven't reread the chapter about Big Black and Our Band Could Be Your Life by is it Michael Azerrad? You should reread it. It's your proper walk down memory lane and how close you are to Steve Albini, but read the whole book. Like that band could, it could be your life.
Yeah.
And you're just 2 or 3 degrees separated from all these people that have influenced you.
Minutemen.
Yeah, the Minutemen. Yeah.
So the title is from their song History, Lesson Part 2.
Yeah, and my sister says, if you haven't heard a Minutemen album, you need to. It'll change your life.
that stuff. That was
Love the minute.
one of my greatest regrets was that I was going to the Minutemen were playing a show in '85, I guess, at Champaign, and I was just like, I've got to see this. It was right after, it was right around the time. Well, it must have been right when The Ray Attack the Last came out, but I was just like, oh, I'm gonna do it. This girl I was dating, she had gotten tickets for Paul Young.
Oh no!
That same night, and I was like, "Well, I'm in tour all the time. I'll placate her and go see." You know, like 2 weeks later, it was dead. No chance.
Anytime you go.
That was exactly
away. Yeah, I had a chance to see Firehose when I was at school.
Oh, wow.
And they were playing at the college auditorium, but I had a term paper which I had put off until the last minute. It was due the next morning, and so I was like, if I don't finish this term paper, I won't graduate. So I guess I'm gonna have to miss Firehose.
I saw Firehose a couple times. One of which was at the Blind Pig.
Oh,
Champagne,
yeah.
you know, the place the size of my house.
Yes.
And, you know,